Is indeed our groundbreaking TV magazine show, Global Connections. Global Connections is all about Namibia's relationships with the global community. This week we are at Wolwedans and we'll be having a chat with Annalie, and she's going to tell us more about Wolwedans and what they do here. My name is Elizabeth Bambi and here are our Global Connections. It is indeed our groundbreaking TV magazine show, Global Connections, and today we are at Wolwedans, and we're still going to continue with our segment of culture and tourism. We're going to have a chat with Annalie, and she will tell us more about Wolwedans, what it's all about, and the role which they play in shaping the future of Namibia, their contribution towards shaping the future of Namibia. So Annalie, how are you?
Oh, I'm very, very well, and actually very excited for this opportunity. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for having me. My name is Annalie Ikwa. I work for Wolwedans as well as the Wolwedans Foundation. And believe it or not, also an initiative that we are running called the Rural Revive Initiative. So it's quite a myriad of hats. In that context, I work as a media lab consultant, a communications coordinator, and an all-round facilitator, I guess, of activities that involve us showcasing ourselves, communicating to the outside world, preparing information that becomes accessible on our social medias and online, etc. So I'm quite a busy person, but at least it's a creative experience for me. And I get a chance to actually, as you said, really shape the narrative and allow people to access our information in a way that is true to us.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
I wanted to find out, you introduced yourself. You said your role at Wolwedans is
communications coordinator as well as a media lab consultant. The media lab is really a fun way for us to put together all of our communication requirements into one big pool, because as I mentioned, we run a lot of initiatives along the side as well. We associate with a lot of international organizations, which I'll touch on just now, for example, like the Long Run. We work with a lot of international stakeholders. We've got a few which I'll name, like Conti, or should I say Contina. And in so doing as well, even some of our local partners, the Social Securities Development Fund, the NTA in our education endeavors, the government of Namibia as well in terms of the tourism sector and how we support that as well. So there are a lot of different ways to communicate, a lot of different people to communicate to, but still we only have the one message that we want to communicate. So that becomes a very interesting but fun challenge.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. It seems like Wolwedans has really been busy.
Wolwedans is really busy.
They have been busy, but they are really busy. Speaking of, I would like to find out, how was Wolwedans established? Who is the founder? How was it found?
That is a beautiful story, one that we're quite proud of. So, as it stands, our founder and basically the chairman and the owner of Wolwedans Collection, Camps and Lodges, and the chairman of the Wolwedans Foundation is a gentleman named Stefan Bruckner. Perhaps quite a synonymous name in the tourism industry, because Stefan, at the time alongside his father, created the bedrock of the Wolwedans philosophy, which is really the creation of the NamibRand Nature Reserve. The NamibRand Nature Reserve is a massive piece of land located in the southern Hatap region, right in the Namib Desert, in fact. And the way it began is Stefan's dad, may his soul rest in peace, he passed away quite a few years ago, Mr. Albie Bruckner, apologies, and he started buying small sheep farms. These sheep farms, unfortunately, were no longer being utilized. There was a lot of drought in those years, and a lot of the farmers were packing up, and the land was becoming unused. Sadly, at the time, because they couldn't really farm the sheep, they started killing and hunting the wildlife that was in the area, roaming free with it, was the horses or the oryx or the springbok or the but you name it. I mean, the zebras, everything was kind of at risk. And in so doing, he had a conservation dream to create large landscape conservation by collecting these adjoining farms. By the grace of God, he succeeded. I think at the time a lot of people might have been a bit confused as to what was he doing? Why would he be interested in these pieces of land that were really non-active? But not long after that, in partnership with a lot of the different farmers in the area, in partnership with the then government of Namibia, indeed the land was provided as conservation land. We called it the NamibRand Nature Reserve. It is right there next to the Naukluft National Park, which means it just extends that conservation area as well. Soon after that, the question had to become, what is the purpose of this land? How do we perpetuate conservation on this land? And the question was then raised to Stefan as to what can he do to be involved. He was fresh out of university and just arrived back from Germany with a fantastic marketing degree. And he came up with the idea to use tourism as a means to purport conservation. Starting out with one tiny little tent, which we called, if I'm not mistaken, the Dune Camp or something. It was a tiny little tent in the middle of nowhere. And from there, it inevitably just grew. We are now at, I think, 5 camps, beautiful camps that have grown over the years. We have got a small village. This is very curious. This small village actually caters for, or should I say, our tourist supporters. These are all the people that are working behind the scenes, whether it's our builders, whether it's our team members who are serving these guests. We all actually live in the village. This is where our homes are. We stay there for about a good 10 weeks, straight out throughout the 10 weeks, and then we take a week off or so, but it's technically home. And so it's quite an operation in the middle of the desert. Added to that, we had to find a way to keep our camps and lodges running. This means water, electricity, food provision. We had to eventually start building our own gardens so that we could actually get our own vegetables, get our own fruits to an extent. We have pigs, we have horses, we have a variety of different animals that we also take care of in that space. And we have in my opinion, one of the world's most elaborate water management systems. And I think it would be world stakes because of where we are in the desert. Finding the water was perhaps the most important and the most difficult thing that we did. But we dug a borehole and we were very, very lucky to actually find water. And from there created a very elaborate water management system. Not only does it manage our wastewater, it also manages the actual drinking water that we pump through a variety of very unique methods, up the dunes, around the bends, all the way to boulders where our furthest camp is from our base camp. And yes, we provide our guests with clean water that has been filtered in the earth for thousands of years. It's some of the cleanest water on the planet. We have also managed to create our own energy supply system using solar panels, obviously, because what is the one commodity that is free and fresh and always there? The bright sun. And with that, we have also got a very, very elaborate energy system. And this has been a wonderful thing that we have showcased to the world, and in some cases also allowed for it to be duplicated. Part of this process that has given us this leverage to be able to actually survive in the desert the way we do, because it's a very harsh and unforgiving environment, and we try to make it into a tourism experience that is both beautiful but also relaxing, is that we were then identified by an international organization called the Long Run, of whom we were a founding member. The Long Run is a very, very important organization to the greater scheme of large landscape conservation. It introduced to us and to other members of the Long Run as well the concept of the 4 Cs: conservation, community, culture, and commerce, to which we, Wolwedans, always being unique, added our own 5th C, which is now consciousness. But in so doing, we actually abide by these values that have been created in the concept of these 4 Cs. This is where conservation becomes necessary. This is why the commerce of our camps and lodges feeds into our large landscape conservation. This is where our community also becomes important, and I'll touch on how we have utilized these Cs to actually create our own initiatives and to to shape our own course and to follow our own direction. And as a quick example, with regards to how the NamibRand Nature Reserve benefits from the tourism practices that we do is we manage waste in a very, very incredible way. We leave absolutely nothing behind. We also take from our guests a tourism levy and a conservation levy and a community levy. These are levies that we charge each guest, irrespective of who they are. It's part of your bill with us. And those levies are then pumped back into the NamibRand Nature Reserve to support all of its conservation efforts. Whether it is, we count game, whether we are protecting the game, whether we are making sure that everyone is healthy in terms of the animals and the land that we are on as well, and supporting all of our partners. This levy has become quite substantial, and also, if I'm not mistaken, was the first for a tourism enterprise in Namibia to actually find a way to give back to conservation by requesting guests to not just pay for the commercial part of their stay, but also for the conservation part of their stay. And quickly before we continue, from the community perspective, it's very difficult for us. We are probably one of the only, if we stand in the Wolwedans village and look around us, we really can't see anybody else. For a while, perhaps our farming neighbor to the left, but that's about it. So from a community perspective, our closest community is actually the village of Malta here, which is also in the Hagdap region, not too far away from Marienthal. And in Malta here, we found another opportunity to support and to revive and to aid in whatever way we can the upliftment of that community. And this is where our initiative with building a desert-based economy and working with our Rural Revive initiative became a reality. All of this lies under the fantastic umbrella of the Arid Eden Project. I think it's just the safest way to describe to all of our viewers as well that everything we do is underwritten by a philosophy which we call our Arid Eden Project. I mean, if you just separate the two words, Arid and Eden, you realize we're coming from a very arid environment and we're trying to create an Eden out of it. So it's a bit of a mind game, but it really does work. And I think people respond very well to it. We are supported wholeheartedly, we really, really are. We recently had a small event where we introduced the Arid Eden Project. We introduced Rural Revive to our city-based, let's call it our city-based community, with all of our corporates and our big role players, to see how people are able to support not only our project, but perhaps to also mimic it. Why not duplicate these things and show other people that it's very, very possible to do what we are doing in your own areas in Namibia, whether it's the south, where we have focused our energy, but also maybe the north, the northeast, the southeast, etc.
I've heard about so many ways that people started tourism companies or agencies, but this story is one of a kind. I am so inspired, and one of the things that stood out for me is the fact that Wolwedans is so organized, and they are very, you strategize. Yes, you strategize, you just don't start something, but I also like the patience in how it started or how it was built and how you move from one project to another. And for me, that's really amazing. And if I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this story of Wolwedans, and I'm thinking to myself that, okay, maybe I have a project, or maybe there's something that I want to do, but I may be discouraged by it not being something unique. Listening to what you are explaining right now, I mean, if I'm sitting here and I have this issue, for me, this will be a hope, and I like that I'm really inspired, and I believe that other viewers will also be inspired listening to Wolwedans' story. And speaking of uniqueness,
Yes.
Just for interest sake, what does Wolwedans mean?
Well, to be honest with you,
The word Wolwedans.
Very curious. Look, it's an Afrikaans word if you think about it. It really directly translates to the dancing wolves. The wolves that are dancing. I don't want to assume that I was in Stefan's head when those words were coming up in his mind, but I can also see and feel the creative freedom, the wild freedom that comes from being in the desert, from from experiencing that dramatic stillness, from being so close to, I almost want to say, raw nature, to actually being in a survival mode, but still have all the creature comforts of a wonderful tourism experience around you. These are contradictions. And to make them a reality is giving me slight goosebumps, but also is a very beautiful, wild, and passionately driven thing. So I'd almost want to assume, and I hope I'm correct, that word Wolwedans is really at the root of the wildest, the closest you can get to nature, the freedom of being that close to the sky and the stars and the sand and the creatures and the animals. But at the same time as well, also being brave and courageous to create something beautiful out of something so wild.
Yeah, because when I first tried to pronounce it, I was not sure if it's Afrikaans or English. Like I'm looking for Wolwedans. Then they told me no, it's Wolwedans. That's really interesting. My next question is, Namibia has a rich heritage. How does Wolwedans help to showcase and preserve Namibia's rich cultural diversity?
All right. One of the most obvious things about our location as a collection of camps and lodges is that we are based in the oldest desert in the world, in the Namib Desert. In the Namib Desert, for a lot of our viewers who are Namibian and perhaps for some of our viewers who are not, is also home to our Khoisan people. This is where we will find a lot of that history showcased to us. One of the activities that we have at Wolwedans is called the Bushman Walk. I've done the Bushman Walk a few times. It is tough a little bit because we are traversing thick dune sand, which means you are really hiking. But in that experience, our guides from these ancient historical communities begin to show and reveal to you something quite spectacular. There we are taught about the wildness of our desert. We are taught about how our people, our ancient and historical people, used to live and survive in the desert. I'll give you an example. Being able to follow, what do we call it, when the footprints of the animals, to be able to understand if creatures are sick, if they are pregnant, if they are male, if they are female. Tracking them, for example, as well, utilizing our camel thorn trees for medication, for shade, but also in ways that would have been completely impossible for us statisticals to understand. Being able to look at the sky and understand the weather, being able to respect nature. These are all things that we get taught about, our tourists get taught about on these Bushman walks. Also just being in the south, being able to understand the Namadamara culture, the heritage that we are shown, specifically in the Malta-Here, Sesame areas. This is something that is perhaps new to us because as people become introduced back into the wildness of the Namib Desert, so they also bring their cultures with them. And let's face it, when our tourists arrive there, all we really can showcase to them is the uniqueness of our southern heritage and our southern culture. And of course it's displayed not only by the fact that we do employ a lot of people from the south, but also really only Namibians. And in so doing also expose our guests to these young people, to the people's cultures and their heritages. And like I say, from a community C perspective, we focus on uplifting the South. The South unfortunately just based on its geological position is barren. And right, we don't necessarily have a lot of rain there. We don't necessarily have a lot of farming opportunities. But in so doing, we still continue to thrive and try to create and push the boundaries where we can. So in that respect, Wolwedans plays its part. We play our part in conserving our animals. That's also part of our culture and our heritage, our oryx, and some of the even smaller creatures that a lot of us might not be able to see under our feet, but learn to respect and identify. And so it's a very broad cultural experience. It's a very broad way in which we reach people, but that's what we can do, and that's how we do it.
You slightly touched on some projects. So I would like to ask, are there any community-based projects that Wolwedans is involved in?
I think the most important one, and this is actually a huge backbone of the work that we do, it's very exciting for me to talk about this, because when we consider the linkages between our education philosophy and our tourism philosophy, it almost becomes natural that we would have pursued a qualification experience. So we built 2 colleges, vocational training centers. The first one is called the Wolwedans Desert Academy. It is at Wolwedans in the desert. It's where our trainees are trained. We have facilitators that live there and support the trainees, as well as introduce the trainees into the working environment by giving them practical exposure to the entire tourism value chain, whether it is serving our guests, cooking their food, maintaining their rooms from a housekeeping perspective. So that is actually quite key. And those trainees are doing a hospitality and tourism level 2 qualification. They are also able to do a level 3 qualification. They can focus in commercial cookery. They can also focus in tourism as well. We have only recently introduced a horticulture qualification, which is by complete surprise just been approved by the NTS. We're very proud of ourselves in that respect. We then also have created many years ago the Namibian Institute of Culinary Education, which is based at NICE. That is the acronym, NICE, which stands for the Namibian Institute of Culinary Education, where for many years we also had a restaurant-based educational facility where the food that people ate, the trainees who served them, it was all part of their in-house course. So that is perhaps our biggest contribution to Namibia. I think to date we have graduated a little over 350 young Namibians as trainees, qualified, and put them right back into the tourism sector.
I wanted to find out, you mentioned that if my memory doesn't fail me, you mentioned that you are mostly based in the southern part of Namibia. If I'm a traveler and I'm coming to Namibia and I'm going to have my experience with Wolwedans, what are the top 3 facilities that you would advise me to visit?
Or the top 3 activities, perhaps something
yes.
to do. Okay, well, the first part is getting there. Okay, how do I get there? And it's quite a wild story, but we are really, really far away from the beaten track. So I do believe that getting to Wolwedans is actually part of the experience, literally. We do have our own very small car hire, so you are actually able to hire a 4x4 Land Cruiser from us and get yourself through our directions to Wolwedans, which is a fantastic experience. I mean, driving through that land just to get to the middle of the desert is actually quite something remarkable. But once you are there, I did mention the village walk, which is basically a tour. We call it the Heart and Home tour of our base camp. It's a very, very eye-opening thing, especially for us Namibians, to see our water management system, to see our waste management system, to see how we live and survive in the wild. And I think that is probably going to be the number 1 experience I would advise. Since we also have wild horses in the south, I think even if you're a first timer, I've done it as well before, to do a bit of a horse ride through the dunes. That's quite spectacular. It reminds me a lot of also doing an e-bike ride through the dunes. It's something quite the same. E-bikes are easier because they kind of fly. They fly because they've got a motor. So they almost match your pedaling. You think you're going fast, they're going to take you twice as fast. That's also quite a beautiful experience through the dunes. And then I think lastly, we have a hot air balloon experience, which is remarkable. That is where you wake up very, very early in the morning, probably at 5 o'clock, and you are at the balloon by 5:30, and you are up in the sky before the sun rises. And I think that is something really to behold. Once you are flying in absolute silence over the NamibRand Nature Reserve, something might actually change inside your heart. Maybe there's some harmony or happiness that could be unlocked there. It's an offering that we do through an organization called Namib Sky. So Wolwedans doesn't actually run the event, or should I say the activity ourselves, but that is who we partner through. But Namib Sky have been doing this for many, many years, absolutely reputable, if not the most reputable ballooning company in Namibia. And we're lucky that they actually operate from the south. You mentioned 3, but I'll add one more. Another way to get to the NamibRand Nature Reserve is also through a flight. So we work very closely with our flight companies some of our guests actually like to do an actual flight once they are there. And this is just a normal tourism flight that can take them all the way up to Sotosvlei, Swakopmund, Luderitz even. That is a wonderful experience to be able to see the Namib Desert from the sky.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much today, and I don't know how many times I'm gonna say it, but it is indeed our groundbreaking TV magazine show. My name is Elizabeth Bambi, and this was our Global Connections.